Listen up, because this story hits different. It's tender, it's fierce, and it'll leave you wondering about your own roads not taken. We're talking the real American West. Endless desert horizons, sun-bleached adobe walls, and the kind of heat that makes you feel every heartbeat. This is where fragile hopes and iron wills crash together, and nothing is ever the same afterward. It started small. One woman stepping off a rattling bus into a world she wasn't ready for, and one man shaping clay like he was shaping time itself. That single intersection was enough to rewrite everything. Before we ride deeper, drop a like if you're with me and let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you joining us from? Sable Thorn stepped down from the rattling old bus, tugging at the strap of her camera as the brutal Arizona sun hit her like a forge hammer. The desert rolled out forever. Endless red rock, blazing gold sand, tough sagebrush and cactus standing defiant against the merciless light. Back in New York, the sky was sliced into sharp pieces by steel and glass towers. Here the vast emptiness felt like freedom and danger all at once. She drew in a lungful of dry, mineral-scented air and felt a small knot of nerves twist in her gut. This wasn't just another location shoot. This was a different world from the tightly scheduled life she'd built back east. Her orders from the brass vault were straightforward. Photograph and document living native pottery traditions, zeroing in on today's Apache makers. Sable was proud of her sharp eye and careful notes, yet deep down she wasn't sure what she was really chasing out here in the heat shimmer. A spark? A tether? Something she hadn't even known was missing until the city lights no longer reached it. Questions drifted through her mind like mirages rising off the scorched ground. The little settlement hugging the festival grounds looked like it had been paused mid-breath decades ago. Adobe walls, faded pale by sun and wind, lined the streets. Bold tribal paintings clung to those same walls, holding stories older than the dust that constantly swept over them. Stalls brimmed with handcrafted silver, turquoise, and clay, bright colors and tight, meaningful patterns everywhere. Sable walked slowly, notebook open, pencil scratching quick lines and observations. Every pot seemed to breathe its own quiet history, tied straight to the dirt beneath her boots. Awe and a strange humility settled over her. Her interest went far beyond the job. In New York, she'd often felt like a ghost among colleagues who chased the right handshakes instead of real substance. Out here, among the makers, everything felt stripped down, true, no pretense. She started wondering what it would feel like to build something that carried weight beyond pretty surfaces, something alive with purpose. Every swirl, every fingerprint pressed into the clay looked like it meant something. She was pulled not only to the objects, but to the people who shaped them, to the ceremonies, the handed-down knowledge, the stubborn thread of heritage that refused to break. And that was when she saw him. Riven sat at his wheel, hands dusted pale with wet clay, fingers guiding a vessel with calm, sure control. There was a stillness around him, a rhythm that didn't hurry, as though he and the earth were holding a private conversation through every turn of the wheel. Sable stopped short, caught. The frantic painters and sculptors she knew back east were always racing the clock. His every move felt chosen, slow, almost prayerful. She stood there watching, reluctant to break the spell. Then a hot wind rolled through the fairground, whipping dust into lazy spirals, and something inside her shifted. Watching wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to know how he chose each form, each mark, how those steady hands turned centuries of memory into something she could hold. Her notebook slipped forgotten into her bag. Words wouldn't do this justice. She wanted to feel it. Their eyes met. Riven's gaze was level, curious without pressing. He dipped his head in a small, polite acknowledgement. Sable nodded back and felt an unexpected quickening under her ribs. In that single heartbeat, the desert seemed to lean closer. The air grew heavier, warmer, humming with unspoken promise. She couldn't tell if it was the heat, the scent of clay, or the quiet power rolling off him, but for the first time in years, she felt wide awake. She stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Sable." Her voice came out softer than she intended, despite the cool control she usually wore like armor. He answered in a low, even tone, each word measured, carrying the slow cadence of someone who spoke only when the thought was ready. They traded a few easy words about the festival, about throwing techniques, about how the sun could burn through a hat like it wasn't even there. Even in those ordinary sentences, Sable sensed layers beneath the surface, stories and hard-earned understanding she could only guess at. As the sun slid lower, stretching long shadows across sand and stone, she understood this journey was already becoming something bigger than pottery or a paycheck. The desert, the gathering, this quiet man at the wheel, they'd stirred a small, stubborn flame inside her, a flicker of wonder and possibility she hadn't felt in far too long. She'd come looking for pictures and facts. What she might carry home could be worth far more. A jolt of inspiration, a real change, and a connection she hadn't known how to name yet. Next morning, before the sun cleared the horizon, Sable was already walking back toward the festival grounds. The desert lay hushed at that hour, air cool and laced with sage. Vendors were unfolding tables, the occasional truck engine coughed, boots scuffed across sand. She'd sworn she wouldn't bother the makers, but the pull toward Riven was stronger than any promise she'd made to herself. Today she didn't just want to see his pots. She wanted to understand the way he carried the desert, the old ways, the long memory of his people in every calm, deliberate motion. Riven was already there, silhouette sharp against the rising light. Sable hung back, notebook in hand, trying not to disturb the rhythm. The wheel turned smooth and steady under Riven's hands, fingers coaxing the wet mound of clay with a near-sacred care. Each slow revolution felt deliberate, almost like a quiet ceremony, and Sable found herself locked in, spellbound by the pulse of it. This wasn't simply making pots. It was breathing life into stories, into memory, into something that carried a soul. Finally, she found her voice. "Your hands, the way you work. It's something else," she said, the words soft, almost swallowed by the desert hush. Her own voice rang too loud in the stillness. Riven paused, lifted his eyes. Warm, curious, no trace of judgment. "Thank you," he answered, voice low and even, every syllable weighed before it left him. "It ain't just about the moves, it's about listening to the clay, to the ground, to the old tales it's holding." Sable nodded, the phrase sinking in like cool water on cracked earth. "Listening to the clay," she echoed, tasting the idea out loud. It sounded half mystic, a truth she'd never bumped into amid the sharp-edged routines of New York. Riven tilted his head a fraction, studying her the way a man reads distant thunder. "You didn't come out here only to take pictures and write notes," he said quietly. "You came to understand." The words landed like a well-aimed stone, rippling straight through her. She'd always seen her job as standing on the outside, watching, recording, packaging culture into neat reports for the brass vault. But his simple statement felt like a dare, an open door she hadn't noticed before. All these years she'd stayed on the sidelines of her own life, careful, guarded, never quite stepping all the way in. Now the chance to change that stood right in front of her. "You want to give it a try?" he asked, nodding toward the wheel. Sable blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Throw a pot?" "Yeah," he said, plain and easy, hands still steady on the clay. "Feel it, don't overthink. Let the clay show you." Her pulse kicked hard as she stepped up. The wheel spun alive under her, hungry, demanding focus. She laid her palms on the cool, slick surface, feeling the grain, the pushback, the faint, living warmth. Riven eased her hands into place, gentle but sure, guiding the angle, the pressure, the steady beat. The wheel sped up faster than she expected. For a heartbeat, the clay bucked and wobbled beneath her uncertain grip. Panic flared inside her chest, but his calm stayed close, a quiet anchor. "Breathe," she told herself. "Listen. Feel. Don't fight it." Time smeared. With every turn, she started to sense it. The deep story locked inside the clay, the ancient hands that had worked it before her, the faint murmur of unbroken tradition. This wasn't craft alone. It was a living bridge linking yesterday to right now, a channel for hope, for raw feeling, for real connection. When she finally drew her hands away, a simple, graceful shape stood on the wheel. Nothing perfect, but honest and alive. Sable stared, stunned. Pride and a wild thrill rushed through her like a sudden wind. Riven's smile was small, private, eyes shining with quiet respect and something like pride. "You heard it," he said. "Not just the clay. You heard yourself." The words struck bone deep. Something inside Sable cracked open, a bright spark she hadn't felt in years. Excitement, wide-open possibility, and a fragile, stubborn hope swirled together with the adrenaline still singing in her veins. This trip had never really been about the assignment or the art. It was about waking up, about real change. As the morning sun climbed, throwing hard-edged shadows across the festival grounds, Sable and Riven kept talking. He opened up about his methods, the old meanings stitched into every design, the way his people, guided by the Dustborn, had guarded these ways through hard years. Sable drank it in, notebook forgotten on the ground beside her. Writing it down wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to live it, to feel it from the inside. By the time she walked back to her little rented cabin that afternoon, her mind was humming like a taut wire. Everything had shifted. She'd arrived hunting facts and frames. She walked away carrying curiosity, a fresh fire of inspiration, and a sense of what was possible, a feeling she hadn't even known she was starving for. The desert, the wheel, those steady hands steering hers, they'd swung a door wide she never realized was shut. And somewhere far down inside, she knew this was only the opening chapter of something much bigger than clay. A story that might remake not just her work, but the whole damn way she moved through the world. The days after that blurred into a rhythm of sun-drenched dawns and star-scattered nights. Sable's days turned upside down, from standing back and watching to jumping in with both hands. She rose before first light, restless to get back to the grounds, to the wheels, to the steady heartbeat of Riven's work. Every morning he was already there, shaping clay with a focus that looked close to prayer. Sable tried at first to trap it all with her camera and pages of notes, but she soon saw the truth. No photograph, no scribble, could carry the heat, the patience, the near-holy bond he shared with his craft. She started staying late, asking the questions that really mattered. Where'd you learn to do this? What do those marks really mean? How's your family kept these ways alive when the rest of the world looks the other way? Riven answered slow and careful, words chosen like stones for a medicine bundle. each one carrying extra weight. He talked about bending without breaking, about carrying the old fire forward while still walking into tomorrow. Sable listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes just letting his voice roll over her like another layer of the dry wind. Still, even as the pull between them deepened, a knot tightened in her chest. She was only passing through. A city woman with deadlines breathing down her neck, with the brass vault waiting for polished results. The brass vault had laid it out plain. Deliver a perfect report. Crisp photos, detailed notes, the kind of work that would make the curators and directors nod in approval. Any personal side trips into deeper waters didn't count on the ledger. They were irrelevant to the job. Yet the longer Sable lingered near Riven, the clearer it became. A clean report wasn't enough anymore. She hungered for something rawer, real understanding, full immersion, maybe even a complete remaking of who she was. One dusty afternoon, Riven asked her to come along and help ready a small private ceremony he'd lead with the Cinderkin. She trailed him warily, heart thumping, no idea what lay ahead. They followed a thin trail that snaked into a hidden canyon. Late afternoon light poured over the red walls, turning them warm and molten gold. He explained quietly. This was a family rite to thank the earth and the dustborn, weaving old songs, shared tales, and the quiet language of clay. Sable's pulse raced, equal parts thrill and nerves. She'd read plenty about ceremonies in books, but this was flesh and blood sacred, close enough to touch. As the ritual unfolded, she watched every careful movement, every loaded gesture heavy with meaning. Awe washed over her, mixed with a humbling sense that she was only a guest in a place alive with generations of weight. Riven caught the tightness in her shoulders. He rested a steady hand there, light, grounding. A quick shiver ran through her at the contact. Breathe, he murmured low. Watch, feel it. Don't rush to explain. Let it talk to you. She did. The deep throb of drums, the soft rise and fall of voices, the last heat of the sinking sun, they all flowed into her. Slowly the knot in her chest loosened. In its place came a deep, startling sense of belonging. Not just to the rite, but to the land itself, to the old ways, and in a way that surprised her most, to Riven. The desert no longer looked empty. It breathed, full of stubborn memory, hard-won endurance, and a quiet, living hope. By the time the ceremony ended, Sable felt different, reshaped, yet torn. Excitement and curiosity spun inside her, laced with a pull toward something powerful and half-scary she couldn't quite name. What was growing between her and Riven wasn't only about pots. It was trust built hand over hand, shared moments that laid vulnerabilities bare, a recognition that both of them carried hidden cracks. Still, the sharp voice of reason fought back. She was an outsider, a short-term guest. The desert's gifts were beautiful, but they couldn't erase the hard facts waiting in New York: rent, routines, expectations. Afterward, their talks turned personal, drifting past festival chatter and her assignment. They spoke of kin, of dreams that cost something, of the prices paid to chase what mattered. Sable found herself laughing easier than she had in years, sharing small stories she once would have buried. Riven listened, answered slow and warm, every word carrying an undercurrent of real respect and quiet knowing that went deeper than friendly talk. Yet the tension never quite let go. It coiled inside her and pressed from outside, too. Emails from the brass vault piled up, updates wanted, specific shots requested, gentle reminders of the ticking clock. She'd glance at the inbox and feel a stab of guilt. Hours spent learning from Riven could be labeled wasted time in a boardroom back east. She wrestled hard to balance the job's demands against this blooming need for real discovery, for the kind of truth that felt alive every time she watched him shape clay or heard his voice carry another piece of the old stories. By week's end, the strain hit breaking point. Sable knew the fork in the trail had arrived. She could turn back to the safe, polished New York life, finish the assignment sharp but empty, or she could lean into the wide-open uncertainty of this desert place, its hard lessons, its real bonds, and the deepening pull toward Riven. That evening, the canyon wind swept past, carrying sage and the faint promise of rain. Standing on the rim, Sable felt the unknown tugging at her, and with it a sudden bright spark of courage she hadn't known she owned. Dawn was barely breaking when she found herself on the narrow trail again, heading toward the private canyon. The desert still wore its soft gold veil. Today felt different. Anticipation and a low hum of nerves ran through her like a live wire. Riven had asked her to step into the back of his studio, a corner few ever saw, where he mixed old Apache ways with new ideas. It was rare ground, and Sable knew the invitation meant something big. When she arrived, he met her with a small, steady smile that eased the churn in her thoughts. The studio smelled of fresh clay, warm cedar, and a faint thread of cedar smoke incense, a quiet offering to the earth spirits. Half-finished pieces stood on shelves, catching the morning light, each one holding its own unfinished tale. Sable felt reverence and a flutter of nerves. She was stepping into a place where art and bloodline met, personal as a heartbeat. "Today," Riven said, nodding toward the wheel, "I want to show you something else. Not just how to throw. Intent. Clay's more than shape," he went on. "It's meaning. It's hope you're building." She watched him work, fingers drawing clean, sure arcs, every motion deliberate yet flowing like water. Then he stepped aside. "You want to try?" She hesitated. The weight of unanswered emails, looming deadlines, the demand for flawless work pressed hard. But the call of this moment, truly learning, truly connecting, stepping past watching, was stronger. She nodded. Riven guided her hands to the clay. At first her touch was timid. The mound shivered and threatened to collapse, but he stayed close, correcting gently, encouraging without hurry, never a hint of judgment. Slowly, Sable found her groove. Her hands steadied, grew bolder. The clay answered her focus like it had been waiting for her touch all along. The wheel spun true, locked in rhythm with her breath. As she worked, something deeper stirred, not just in the shape forming under her fingers, but inside her chest. The constant worry of deadlines, the quiet self-doubt that shadowed her back in New York, the hollow ache of loneliness she'd learned to ignore. They all began to slip away. In their place came a sharp, clean clarity, a solid sense of being right here, right now, and a strange, gentle warmth that felt almost like coming home. When she finally drew her hands back, a vessel stood on the wheel. It wasn't flawless, lopsided in spots, rough around the edges, but it pulsed with life, with motion, with raw intent. Riven's eyes found hers. For a long heartbeat, the studio held its breath. Only the soft, steady hum of the wheel filled the quiet. "You're learning," he said, voice low and sure. "Not just the clay. Yourself." Sable's heart slammed against her ribs. His words hit like a slow-rolling thunderclap, waking feelings she'd buried for years. Pride that burned bright, excitement that made her dizzy, and a kind of hope so new it almost scared her. This wasn't about throwing pots. This was connection. Deep roots reaching back through time, through culture, through the creative fire she'd never let herself fully claim. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Want to see the canyon from Ashjaw's lookout?" Curiosity flared hot. She nodded without hesitation. They walked side by side in easy silence. Morning light stretched long shadows across the sand. The trail opened to a wide overlook. The canyon dropped away in blazing bands of orange and rust, stubborn patches of green clinging to the sheer rock, like they'd been there forever. Riven stood quiet for a stretch, letting her take it all in. "Look," he said softly. "It's all right here. The stories, the hard years, the hope that keeps coming back. Every generation before us left something behind. Now it's our watch. What we make, the heart we put in it, that keeps moving forward." A lump rose in Sable's throat. She thought of her own days. Neat, measured, controlled, and how little of it carried any real weight. Here, standing next to a man who lived and felt everything down to the bone, she could almost taste the possibility of a different life. One that matched her deepest wants, her fire, her heart. When she spoke, her voice came out quieter than she meant. "I've never felt anything like this." Riven nodded, eyes steady with understanding. "It ain't only the clay, Sable. It's knowing you can feel this deep, create from this place, hold hope in your own hands." Right then she felt the first real turning point lock into place. The choice stood clear and sharp. Head back to New York, slip into the safe, familiar tracks she'd worn for years, or step all the way into this wild, uncertain world, risking everything for growth, for real making, for a future bigger than she'd ever dared imagine. The desert rolled out endless before them, wide open, tough, full of promise. Sable understood her road wasn't about taking pictures and filing reports anymore. It was about finding her own story. And maybe, just maybe, a bond that could rewrite everything she thought she knew about living. As the sun climbed higher, flooding the canyon with pure gold, a sudden clean clarity rushed through her. She'd crossed a line, from watcher to doer, from fear to nerve, from standing apart to standing together. With the dry wind brushing her face and Riven steady at her side, she knew this was only the start. By the middle of her time in Arizona, Sable felt alive and uneasy in equal measure. Every day with Riven shoved her past the tight borders of her old city life. She'd learned to truly hear the clay, to move with the desert's slow heartbeat, to choose raw creation and real presence over polished perfection. Yet even in the rush of discovery, a stubborn tension stayed coiled inside her, murmuring about deadlines, about expectations, about the life waiting back in the city that refused to let go. Late afternoon brought the storm. Sable had been framing shots of Riven's newest work, pots carved with tight, ancient symbols that carried his people's whole story, when her phone started buzzing like an angry rattler. A flood of emails from the brass vault poured in, demanding progress, insisting on fresh images and notes by week's end. The tone cut sharp. No room for excuses. The job had a hard line, and crossing it wasn't tolerated. She stared at the screen, stomach dropping. The words pressed in tight, suffocating, yanking her straight back to the life she'd started to outgrow. Rigid hours, surface-level wins, a world that measured everything by checklists. Her fingers trembled as she closed the phone. The desert, the festival, even Riven's quiet guidance couldn't block out the pull of that old reality. Guilt and frustration twisted hard in her chest. Riven saw it instantly. "You're carrying something heavy," he said, voice soft but searching. "It ain't the clay fighting your hands. It's the weight you're putting on yourself." Sable met his eyes, desperate for direction, for comfort, for any kind of answer. "I don't know if I can hold both," she whispered. "I want to stay. Learn, really live this. But I can't just walk away from what I owe them. They want results." He nodded slow, set his tools down, crossed to her. "You're at the fork," he said gently. "The hard part isn't picking one path over the other. It's finding what's true inside the pull. What do you want to take with you, really?" Sable drew a shaky breath. His words settled deep, heavy, and true. For weeks, she'd let curiosity, instinct, and a budding sense of purpose lead her. But the hard facts of duty threatened to drag her back to the careful life she'd built, one that now felt empty next to the vivid pulse of this place. Sable felt the emptiness of her old life crash against the fierce, living pulse of the desert and the honest truth of Riven's world. Desperate and dead set at the same time, she made up her mind. She had to do something. She stepped back to the wheel, set her hands on the clay with fresh purpose. Every knot of tension in her chest, the frustration, the fear, the fragile hope, she let it all pour straight into her fingers. The wheel turned smooth and constant. The clay gave way slowly, bending to her will. Each full turn became a conversation, a hard bargain between the iron rules of her city life and the wide-open freedom calling from the new one. Riven watched without a word, his presence solid as rock while her piece took form. This wasn't like anything she'd shaped before. Bold strokes, raw feeling bleeding through every line, yet held together by the skill and quiet wisdom he'd passed to her. When she finally pulled her hands away, a vessel rose between them. Crooked in places, uneven, but alive with meaning. A mirror of her fight, her grit, her awakening. "You see," Riven said, voice soft as twilight, "the clay don't judge your doubts or your fears. It only asks you to be real with it. You can't tame every demand the world throws at you," he went on, "but you can stand by what's true inside you." Tears stung Sable's eyes. Relief, pride, wonder all rushing in together. In that instant she got it. The heart of the desert, the wheel, the guidance he'd given her. Real change never came from being flawless. It came from being honest, from having the nerve to show up as you are. Later that evening, with the sun sliding behind the canyon rim, they sat together on the overlook's edge, boots hanging over the drop. Sable opened up about the dread of going back to New York, losing this fire she'd found, trying to stitch two completely different lives together and knowing it might tear her apart. Riven listened without cutting in, letting every word land. Then he spoke, low and steady. "Hope don't live in safe corners or sure things. It's born right where risk and real purpose collide. Whatever you build from that place, it's going to carry more weight than anything forced on you." Sable felt the shift lock into place. This was the turning point she'd been chasing. She'd stared down the war between duty and longing, and instead of folding to the fear, she'd moved. Created, connected. Let hope take root. The high point wasn't some big outside win. It was the quiet reckoning inside. She could meet her responsibilities without giving up who she was becoming. As the sky turned deep indigo and the first stars blinked awake, a deep calm settled over her. She'd stepped over a line. Her tie to Riven had grown roots. Her trust in her own making had opened wide. A small, stubborn flame of hope burned inside her now. Nothing, not miles or obligations, could snuff it out easy. The road ahead stayed wide open and unknown, but for the first time in forever, she met that uncertainty head-on, chin up, ready. A week later, Sable stood at the fringe of the festival grounds, watching dawn throw long shadows over the sand. The emails from the brass vault had turned sharper, every notification a jab reminding her the clock was running out. She loved it here. The wide desert, the gathering, the feel of clay under her nails, and most of all, Riven's quiet, anchoring presence. But the pull of New York weighed on her heavy as noon heat on sandstone. Riven came up silent, 2 tin cups of tea in hand. He passed one to her, passed. Warmth spread from the cup into her palms, but it was his steady nearness that eased something deeper. "You've been far away today," he said gently, eyes calm but searching. Sable sighed, stirring the tea without really seeing it. "It's the museum. They need the final report soon. I can't pretend it doesn't matter." "But if I go now," she added, voice cracking just a little, "it feels like walking away from everything I've found. The work, the ways, us." Riven nodded slow, understanding carved deep in his face. "The trail ahead ain't ever straight. You're caught between 2 countries. One demands solid ground," he said. "The other hands you open sky. You can't hold both without giving something up, and that give usually takes real backbone." Sable looked straight at him, his words landing like stones in still water. Backbone. That was exactly what she'd been missing before she ever set foot in Arizona. Out here, she'd found the nerve to risk, to be real, to actually live, instead of just getting by. Yet now, with the deadlines closing in and the plane ticket waiting, she felt split clean down the middle, duty dragging one way, longing the other. That afternoon, Riven led her to a far corner of the canyon, a spot his family held sacred, where the land laid itself bare in the clearest light. They climbed, her boots grinding on dry earth, wind carrying sage and the faint, far-off thump of festival drums. At the top, the view stole her breath. The canyon ran forever, soaked in late gold, shadows carving deep into the folds and showing off every tough plant that refused to quit. Riven folded his legs and sat. He motioned for her to do the same. "Look at this canyon," he said quietly. "Wind, rain, sun, they've hammered it for hundreds of years. Its shape shifts, but it stands. Your road's the same," he told her. "You can meet the hard knocks, keep your promises, and still stay true to what's inside you. But you gotta choose on purpose." Sable's heart hammered loud in her ears. This wasn't just talk anymore. It demanded she move. The safe, known life in New York pulled hard one direction. The deep color of the desert, the making, the bond with Riven pulled the other. She knew she couldn't keep drifting through her days half in, half out. Sable knew the moment had come. Let fear keep calling the shots, or grab the unknown by the horns and ride it out with real nerve. "I want to stay," she said at last, voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "I want to keep learning, keep making things, be part of this place, even if it's only for a little while longer. And I want to see what this thing between us could turn into." Riven's face softened, the smallest smile breaking through. "Then move with purpose," he told her. "Wishing ain't enough. You've got to weave that choice right into your days, even if it means rewriting the map you've been following." The air felt thick, like time itself had paused to listen. Sable understood staying wasn't about dodging what she owed back east. It was about stepping into a slower, truer rhythm, one where making, connecting, and staying real could stand side by side with duty. And Riven, he wasn't just teaching her how to shape clay anymore. He was holding up a mirror, showing her the courage, the hunger for change, the strength she'd always carried, but never let run free. In the days that followed, Sable poured herself into the work. She juggled shots and notes for the brass vault, while diving headfirst into everything Riven could show her. Every piece they built together, every tale he passed on, became proof she was choosing to live wide open. She sent updates back east, framing the work as solid and sparked by real fire, trusting her honesty would land with the curators. Still, time kept pressing. Her flight home hung over her like a storm cloud on the horizon. Intentional living didn't erase the practical side. She had to find a way to honor both sides of herself. She'd leave Arizona, but she'd do it her way, carrying every hard-won lesson, every spark of inspiration, every thread of the bond she'd built. She'd weave them straight into whatever waited in New York. The desert sun dropped low, stretching long shadows across the canyon. Sable stood next to Riven, a rare, quiet certainty settling deep in her bones. She'd crossed another hard line, admitting life demands real choices, swearing to stay true even when the ground shakes, meeting the unknown with open eyes and steady hands. Whatever came next, back in the city or right here, she wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. The morning of the final deadline dawned with a strange blend of hurry and calm. Sable sat alone in her little desert studio, surrounded by stacks of notes, quick sketches, and prints still drying. The emails from the brass vault had eased to a slow trickle, gentle prods about the world she'd soon rejoin. But today the old panic didn't rise. She felt steady. Everything she'd soaked up, the desert's lessons, the clay's quiet voice, Riven's steady guidance, hadn't just changed how she worked. It had changed how she lived. She lifted the vessel they'd shaped side by side, the one born from struggle, grit, and stubborn hope. Its edges weren't perfect, but it glowed with purpose, raw and real, holding everything she'd come to understand. For the first time, she saw it clear. Her job didn't have to war with her growth. They could ride together. The trick wasn't giving up ground. It was bringing both worlds into the same circle. Riven stepped in without a sound, like he'd felt her resolve from across the grounds. He rested a hand on the table's edge, eyes moving over her piece with quiet pride. "It speaks," he said simply. "It's telling your story, and mine." Sable smiled, gratitude flooding through her like warm light. "It does, and I think I've figured out how to tell it in a way that respects both sides." The next few hours blurred into motion. She locked in the final photos and notes for the brass vault, pouring the real weight into them. Not just how the pots were made, but the stories they carried, the old meanings, the personal ground she'd broken along the way. She wrote with a bare-knuckle honesty she'd never dared bring to work before. Every frame, every line pulsed with what she'd learned. That making, heritage, and human ties can't be split from real purpose and truth. When she hit send on the last message, relief rolled over her in a long, slow wave. The job was done. But it was bigger than paperwork. It stood as proof of the road she'd walked, solid evidence of growth, backbone, and hope. She leaned back, shut her eyes, and pulled in a full breath, free and deep, for the first time in weeks. Riven eased closer, his nearness steadying her like always. "And now?" he asked quietly. Sable opened her eyes, meeting that calm gaze. "Now we find out what the next stretch looks like." They walked out to the canyon rim together. The desert lay wide and gold under the late sun. Clarity settled over Sable like cool water. This wasn't the end of the trail, just the high point of everything she'd gathered. The strain, the second guessing, the fear of not being enough, they'd all burned down into understanding, toughness, and the willingness to meet whatever came next on her own terms. Riven reached for her hand. A simple move, but it carried everything. The miles they'd covered together, the respect they'd earned, the trust built through making and sharing. Sable took it. The connection flowed through her, quiet and sure as a deep current. For the first time, she truly got it. Love, guidance, partnership. They weren't about having everything locked down. They were about nerve showing up fully and being ready to change side by side. As the sun dropped lower, brushing the canyon walls with deep red and burning amber, a strong, clear hope rose inside her. The exhibit would face judgment back in New York. Obligations would keep coming. Life would stay hard and full of rough ground. But she knew now she had what it took. Tools forged in the desert, in the clay, in the quiet hours with Riven, to face it all. Sable knew she had the tools now. Creativity that burned true, authenticity that cut through noise, courage that held steady in the wind, and a bond with Riven that anchored her even when the ground shifted beneath her feet. Standing shoulder to shoulder with him, she understood the desert hadn't simply schooled her in pots, in old ways, in handed-down stories. It had handed her something far more essential, the raw power of real human connection, the unbreakable strength that comes from letting your guard down, and the fierce hope that only shows up when you dare to walk straight into the dark. For Sable, the high point wasn't just turning in the exhibit. It was claiming the right to live wide awake, on purpose, with her arms open to whatever came next. Her time in Arizona had forged something unbreakable, both inside her soul and in the work she carried home. A living monument to the backbone she'd grown and the tie she'd built with Riven. As twilight crept over the canyon, the desert air turned cool and soft against her skin. Sable felt not an ending, but a doorway swinging wide. The life she'd lived here, shaped with her hands, shared in quiet moments, it wasn't finished. It was the first strong bridge to every possibility she used to fear. With Riven beside her, she knew whatever lay ahead, she'd walk into it clear-eyed, not hesitating, but carrying hope like a lantern. The flight east felt like a dream half-remembered. Sable pressed her forehead to the window and watched the red rock and golden sand fall away beneath the wings, growing smaller. Distant, a sharp ache twisted in her chest, missing the slow heartbeat of the desert, the cool feel of clay giving under her palms, the quiet strength of Riven always close by. But another part of her thrummed with pure energy. She'd sent the work. She'd uncovered a version of herself she never knew existed, one that could face life head-on with real nerve, real honesty, and real hope. Back in her New York apartment, the city hit her harder than before. The horns, the glare of lights, the endless rush of bodies. It no longer crushed her. It felt alive, electric, brimming with chances she hadn't seen before. She unpacked her prints and notes with careful hands. Every shot, every scribbled line had become more than evidence. They were trail markers, proof of miles walked, lessons carved deep, walls she'd stepped through. The brass vault replied fast. The curators were hooked, praising the raw truth, the emotional weight, the way the work breathed. Sable realized, folding her Arizona days into the report, the ceremonies, the old tales, the private breakthroughs, had lifted it far beyond clean technique. She hadn't just met the job. She'd turned it into something breathing, a living story of heritage, making, and a woman coming fully awake. Even with the praise ringing in her ears, her thoughts kept drifting back to Riven. She sent a short message. Simple thanks. simple connection. His reply came quick, short, warm, carrying that same calm steadiness that had first pulled her in. Keep listening, keep making. The canyon, the clay, your courage, they ride with you always. Sable smiled, a soft wave of reassurance moving through her. Distance hadn't weakened what they'd built. If anything, it had hardened into something solid she could lean on through any storm. She understood now. Real connection doesn't need nearness. It lives in presence, in trust, in seeing and being seen. In the weeks after, Sable wove Arizona straight into her days. She started leading a small workshop at a neighborhood art spot, teaching not just how to throw a pot, but how to bring real intent and full attention to every move. She kept writing to Riven, swapping ideas, sketches, quiet thoughts, stitching the miles together with shared fire and understanding. One sharp autumn morning, she stepped back into her own studio, purpose humming under her skin. She slapped a fresh slab of clay onto the wheel. Her hands moved, sure, guided by instinct, by everything she'd earned in the desert, by the quiet confidence that had taken root there. As the wheel spun, she thought of Riven, of the canyon walls glowing gold, of the desert sun burning high, of the deep stories locked in every grain of earth. This wasn't just making pots anymore. It was carrying the trail forward, a living proof of growth, hope, and the ties that hold. Weeks later, a letter came from the Arizona Festival. An invitation to come back. Not as someone passing through, but as a partner in a new show mixing old hands and new vision. Sable's chest swelled. The answer was easy. She could return, weaving her city life with the desert lessons and the people who'd changed her, building something that honored every part of her. When she told Riven over video, his face broke into a rare, quiet grin of real pride. "You picked the right trail," he said. "The work, the connection, the courage, carry them on. The canyon's always open," he added. "So's the road." Sable leaned back, letting his words sink in deep. She saw it clear now. The real teaching of the desert, the clay, their shared days wasn't about prizes or applause. It was about opening your arms to what you can't control, about staying present, about tending hope like a slow-burning fire. She'd reached a place where growing inside, doing work that mattered, and holding real bonds weren't pulling different directions. They were braided tight, each one making the others stronger. As she packed for the return trip, Sable felt whole, edged with sweet anticipation. The desert had given her clear sight, steady nerve, and a connection that held fast. Now she had the chance to live it all at once. The road wasn't over. Hard days, doubts, moments of fear would still come. But she'd meet them with a strength she'd never owned before. The Arizona sun, the turning wheel, Riven's quiet guidance. They'd marked her heart and mind forever. Sable smiled, hands sliding over fresh clay once more. With every spin, she felt the thread unbroken, past and present weaving together, duty and deep want walking side by side, fear giving way to hope. The piece she shaped, like her life, carried flaws, but it overflowed with purpose, toughness, and promise. And right then Sable understood. True hope, the kind that changes everything, wasn't a place you arrive. It was a choice you make every day, a practice you keep, a way you choose to stand in the world. The desert waited for her boots again. The clay waited for her hands. Riven waited, not as a teacher anymore, but as a partner on the long trail of making, finding, and holding hope. And Sable, finally, was ready. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think." If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.